Okay, so our topic today will be library of functions. We'll be discussing the different types of functions. The types of functions can be broadly classified into 8 main types. Here we have the constant function, identity function, square function, cube function, absolute value function, square root function, cube root function, and lastly, the reciprocal function. Let's first take a look at the constant function. The constant function, as you can see, mainly consists of a horizontal line, f of x equals c, and the domain for this function would be a set of all real numbers or negative infinity to positive infinity with a range of c, which in this case, if you look closely, that would be 2 in this example. And this is considered an even function because it is symmetric to the y-axis. The second type of function we have here is the identity function. This type of function is also known as the linear function. F of x equals x with a domain of negative infinity to positive infinity and a range of negative infinity to positive infinity, or a set of all real numbers. This function here is an odd function because it is symmetric to the origin, as you can see. And then we have the square function. The square function can also be called a quadratic function, and this shape right here is called a parabola. You can have a parabola facing upward or downward. In our case, it's upward. F of x equals x squared with a domain of negative infinity to positive infinity and a range of 0 to infinity. And this function over here is considered even since it is symmetric to the y-axis. Cubic function or cube function is f of x equals x cubed with a domain of negative infinity to infinity and a range of negative infinity to infinity. This function right here is considered an odd function because it is symmetric to the origin. Next, we have the absolute value function. F of x equals absolute value of x. The domain, as you can see, is from negative infinity to positive infinity with a range of 0 to infinity. It is considered an even function because if you look closely, you can see that it is symmetric to the y-axis. Next, we have the square root function. F of x equals square root of x, or x to the power of half. This is how the graph would look like for this type of function, with a domain of 0 to infinity and a range of 0 to infinity as well. This graph right here is actually neither even or odd. Since it has no symmetry at all, we usually say it's neither. Then we have a cube root function, which is f of x equals 1 radical x, or x to the power of a third. This function is actually similar to the cube function. It's just more of a horizontal version. It has the same domain and the same range, and it's also an odd function since it is symmetric to the origin. And lastly, we have the reciprocal function, which is f of x equals 1 over x. And the domain for this function is actually all the numbers included except for the 0. And the same goes to the range, so all the numbers included except for the 0. And in terms of what type of function this would be considered a odd function because, as you can see, it is symmetric to the origin.